Well, some of Donald Trump's Republican rivals are lashing out over his controversial comments on illegal immigration.
He's going to have to defend those remarks. I never will, and I will stand up and say that those are offensive, which they were.
And he doesn't represent the Republican Party or its values.
So, will the fallout divide the Republican Party? Let's ask our political panel. That's why we woke them up personally. The editor for the National Review, Washington, Eliana Johnson's here. Democratic pollster Jessica Tarlov is here. And former Howard Dean press secretary Eric Schmelzer is here. Eric, let's start with you. Is Donald Trump hurting the party or helping or hurting himself?
Well, I think it's both. I mean, he's helping himself with a certain segment of the Republican Party that really is attracted to that kind of message. But as a progressive, as somebody who's going to support the Democratic nominee, I'm loving this. I'm loving Republicans arguing with each other over whether Mexican immigrants are a bunch of drug dealers and rapists, and they can't figure out whether the answer is yes or no, if it's offensive or not. I love it.
And Jessica, I think there's no doubt about it when you see that Democrats are saying, trying to keep the fire going, to keep the Republicans going at each other. And I think Governor Huckabee, as well as Senator Cruz, have backed out of that.
I wouldn't say fully backed out of it. I mean, Huckabee actually had the most inclusive message of everyone, where he said, you know, people come to this country because they want to be American, because we're offering this amazing opportunity for them. I mean, I think he was fantastic on it. Cruz, I'd say halfway back down. You know, he said, I don't want Republican on Republican violence. Trump talks a certain way that I don't speak, but he brought up an important issue, which is the amnesty issue. 72% of Americans, I would add, support the immigrants who are here in this country being able to stay. They disagree whether they want them to be citizens or residents.
Right.
But, I mean, people do want them to be able to stay in the country.
And Eliana, I think you're onto something with that. As Americans, we say we're not going to be able to deport 11 to 14 million people. However, almost everybody, I think a lot of Democrats too, say, should we stop the leaking at the border first?
Look, no Republicans disagree about this, but posing the question the way Trump did, you know, it's like, in no way is this positive for the party. And you see, I think Eric's response that Democrats are celebrating illustrates that perfectly. It's a disaster.
But in a way, if Donald Trump feels one way about immigration, maybe he's right on the money when it comes to the budget, when it comes to the Iranian policy. So Huckabee might be off for Iranian policy as opposed to the other. What is wrong with 16 different people having differing views on different issues? Is there a problem?
It's harmful for the party because, as Eric suggested, it's like posing a question of when did you stop beating your wife? And we have to have Jeb Bush come forward and say, no, Donald Trump doesn't represent Republicans. And he's also sucking up all the oxygen in this far-right space and preventing another more serious candidate from gaining traction in that space.
One of the biggest growing segments of the electorate is Latino Hispanic voters, and it's getting larger and larger. For them to look at a Republican Party that can't decide how to categorize Mexican immigrants
Mexican illegals coming across the border, and he says, I like Mexicans.
That's fine.
Jessica.
Statistically speaking, they're less likely to commit a violent crime than the general American populace. So he's not just wrong, he's offensively
Jessica,
wrong.
we also see what happened in San Francisco, and it's the exact illustration of what he was worried about.
In a country of 300+ million people, these things do happen. It was a terrible tragedy, but it was a coincidence this happened this week, and I think people are using that as an argument against the immigration debate. I'm not justifying it in any way. I understand why we're talking about it. But at the same time, what he said, it's the wrong tone and tenor for the Republican Party, as Eliana was saying.
There's no question he's talking about a real problem, but it's not helpful to Republicans to bring it up in the way that he did.
We'll see. We know he's watching right now. We can't see what he has to say.
Don't quit, Donald. Don't quit.
Okay. Well, he's doing quite well in the polls. Bill Kristol says there's a lot of things he's doing that are absolutely correct. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey,
all right, 11 minutes now before the top of the hour. Let's change gears. Shocking.